Hi and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today in this interview with Amanda Radke. Did I say
Yep.
that right? Good.
Yep.
I
You got
forgot
it.
to ask you how to pronounce it earlier. I generally always ask the guests, like, how do I pronounce their names? And especially if I'm not 100% sure. So I'm glad I got that. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being with us today.
Yeah. I'm excited to be visiting with you.
Awesome. So can you share, Amanda, a little bit with our audience, a little bit of a background about what is it that you do and what got you to this position right now of being a speaker and spreading your message?
Yeah. So my family raises cattle in South Dakota and we sell beef locally. So I can't ship to Florida, but I am very passionate about beef, and I see that our industry is under attack every day, whether it's from animal rights activists or environmental extremists, politicians, the media, celebrities. It's always been mind-boggling to me that the cows are constantly the target. And I could talk forever about the benefits of cattle on the land or the nutritional benefits of beef. And I do, that's literally what I do, traveling and speaking to meetings. But the reality is that cattle ranchers can't fight this fight alone. There is an absolute agenda to take farmers and ranchers off the land and to eliminate meat, dairy, and eggs from the dinner table. And so what I have found is some of the best advocates and fighters out there are people who really love beef, but didn't grow up in the industry. And so honestly, that's kind of what the ranching community is looking for, is allies that are willing to speak up and talk to politicians and say, like, hey, here's been the benefits of beef for me. And here's why this is an important food to keep in our diets. And, why are we talking about things like sin taxes to curtail our consumptions? And so that's really what drives me. But on a personal level, I am a carnivore too. I have drastically changed my health by ditching the dietary guidelines and the, calories in, calories out formula and, low fat, everything. I totally went the other direction and landed upon carnivore. And so it's amazing that the answer for me health wise was right in my backyard the whole time. So it's been a journey. Yeah. And I'm good friends with folks like Kelly Hogan and Charles Washington and some of those original carnivores who really walked me through it and gave me permission to enjoy the beef that I raised on my ranch.
How did you discover the carnivore way of eating?
Yeah. So I'd first gotten married in 2010, and my husband and I wanted to start a family and found ourselves in a really long infertility battle, and just kind of walking through that. And I had tons of health issues, but I was dieting and working out, and I thought I was doing everything right, and yet I kept getting sicker and sicker. I was pre-diabetic. I was on thyroid medicine. My hair was falling out. I had no period. I was in really tough shape. I really just was not doing well at all. And so I basically tried every diet out there. And I can't even remember how I landed on the carnivore group or their forum at the time. But I ended up there, and they basically said, Amanda, quit counting calories, eat all the beef that you can eat, and, just see what happens. And so that was April 2012. And by July 2012, I had gotten my period back and was off all meds. And by September 2012, I was pregnant. And so it was a
Wow.
amazing turnaround.
Wow. Just from the diet alone,
Yep.
no other intervention.
Nope, didn't change anything else. And I was on multiple medications, and yeah, it was just like instant. And I had to really fight through that because my body was just starved for nutrition. So I was eating 3 to 5 pounds of beef a day. I mean, I was just stuffing myself because I had this history of dieting and then binging and all of these, food addictions. And that was the only way to cure it, was with a lot of beef. So yeah, and I've enjoyed good health ever since.
That is incredible, amazing. Everybody should hear about your story. And I know there are other people also who share that similar trajectory. So it's happened over and over again. Steak and Butter Gal, I don't know if you're familiar with her
Yeah.
platform, Bella. She also had lost her period after being like 6 years on a vegan diet. And then the way that she got it back was on going strict carnivore. So did you go strict carnivore as in like the seasonings? Did you put seasonings on top of your beef, or is it like just beef?
Early on, I think I guess, yeah, I maybe flirted with getting rid of seasonings on and off, but I just literally just as much hamburger as I could eat is what I did in the early days. Like I didn't mix it up or anything. I just stuck to, this is what they're telling me to do. I didn't make it fancy. And then over time, I kind of, played around with different meats that I enjoyed, or, just we eat nose to tail on our ranch. We have every cut available to us. But yeah, I never got so strict that at least not long term, that I ditched like all salt or anything. Although, like I said, I tried, dabbled in that, or like the broths and that kind of thing. But I really learned it was very intuitive. Just eat the meat that you like and that was available to me. And, the rest kind of took care of itself. And I ended up being just like annoyingly fertile. My 3 kids were born exactly 2 years apart, like almost to the date. And so, yeah,
Annoyingly fertile. I love it.
like people wouldn't know I had this long history of challenges. And yeah, it's just mind-boggling to me that so many people are suffering following these dietary guidelines that are so opposite of what I've seen so many people do to regain their health and vitality.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So since 2012, today is like exactly 10 years almost that you've been carnivore, and you're not falling apart without all those vitamin C and the fiber, and that's very interesting.
Yep. And for people who are curious, no supplements. I've kind of on and off over the years taken supplements. When I was pregnant, my doctor really wanted me to take them. But I just found everything, there's so much packed into meat. Beef has 10 essential nutrients. It's got zinc, iron, and protein. It's got the saturated fats that, fuel your brain. It's literally a superfood. And so I found I really don't need anything else. And now I would say I'm more relaxed. I have dairy, cheese, and deli meats if I'm on the road. Like I'm not hardcore strict in that regard, but I eat meat, and I no longer have this food addiction where, I'm going to binge eat and I'm going to then have to restrict. It's just, I eat, it's part of my day, it's fuel, and I just move on. And so my weight has been, besides being pregnant, my weight's been very stable. It's, the vanity thing. I think that's like programming. You always wish you were like 10 pounds lighter, you know what I mean? But for me, I'm like at a healthy, stable weight. I'm not yo-yo dieting, and it's just kind of autopilot now. There's no cravings or things that I have to fight off. It's not a mental thing anymore. It's just kind of like, you become like a wolf in a way. You just eat and move on with your life.
Yeah, I love that you said no cravings, because for me, that's like the biggest reason why I do it. It's the cravings, because when I eat other stuff and carbs, and even like what others might consider healthy carbs, it makes me want to eat more of it. I need more carbs. I need more honey. And it's just a battle all the time when I keep including those foods in my diet. And that's probably the number one reason why I do carnivore. And then there are other reasons, obviously, like longevity, overall health, weight loss, all that stuff. But the cravings part, and that like just being constantly consumed with what am I going to eat today, tomorrow, meal prepping, all those decisions that we make, you remove like 90% of the stuff that take out your time, that's just trying to manage this food addiction that you're struggling with.
Yep. Yeah, I did low carb for a while, and I found it was always me negotiating with my mind, like, oh, just a few more carbs, and then you're constantly counting them, and just like what a way to be like a slave to the food you eat, instead of just, it's liberating to just, I'm hungry, I'm going to fuel my body with, I know it's nourishing. It doesn't have to be entertaining. I mean, it can be, but that's so much a part of our culture now. Food is wrapped around so many of our traditions and our memories and our holidays. And I had to learn all of that. Like, oh, I'm not making sugar cookies with my mom anymore. That was really hard for me. Things like that. But I've realized I can make memories and they can be centered around much different things than just food. And I'm also a hit at parties now because I bring like smoked meats, that everyone
Right.
wants to eat instead of the carbs that everybody else brings. So it's
Right.
okay. It's just a kind of a process of letting go of what you once knew.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It gets so much easier the more, literally after like even 2 weeks on the diet, it gets so much easier, and then it keeps getting easier and easier.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what do you give your children?
Yeah, I would say they're more low carb or we're more casual about it. They see mom, so I'm trying to model that behavior, but I'm also giving them that opportunity to like, okay, we go somewhere social, they eat something. Okay, how did you feel afterwards? Was it awesome? Yeah, it tastes good. But now look, you have a headache or you're crabby or your tummy hurts. And so I want them to recognize that and then be able to kind of grow up and make those choices themselves. So I wish I could say they're like hardcore carnivores. I know other people are able to achieve that, but my husband's a full carb eater, and so there's like a balance.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we just really focus on protein, as much protein as we can get in them, and try to curtail everything else,
Yeah.
which is a very hard thing in today's world where there's just like sugar and carbs everywhere. But we homeschool, and so that has helped immensely. My daughter was in the public school system for a year before the pandemic and before we pulled them. But like every other week was a party with full, red fruit punch with, 36 grams of sugar in it, plus all the cupcakes and everything. And it was like nonstop, the snacks. And it was going to become very difficult to walk them through that. So at home
Yeah.
on the farm, we can control a lot of those variables a lot easier than, you know,
Yeah.
every day having to face the choice of saying no to the
Yeah.
bombardment of food.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Children are bombarded with one of the most addictive substances that we have discovered, but yet nobody seems to bat an eye. And even the people who are aware of what's going on, they feel helpless. They don't know what to do. It's like your child gets invited to a birthday party. If, it's your child is going to want to eat that cake, and then you've got birthday parties year round, and then you've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. I mean, every single occasion is marked by those kinds of foods. It's
Yep.
like infiltrated every aspect of our life.
Mhm.
And it can be very difficult. So I completely understand that.
Well, and I think that's how people get into that cycle of yo-yo dieting too. It's because even as adults, you don't know how to, it's like, oh, well, 4th of July is coming up. There's going to be a big barbecue with all the fixings. I'll start my
Right.
diet July 5th. And so you eat the foods you know are going to make you feel terrible. And then the next day you're punishing yourself for the foods. Like my
Yeah.
Independence Day will be, let's have a steak or let's smoke, a tri-tip. It's going to be amazing, but I'll also
Yeah.
feel good tomorrow too. And so that I think it really is kind of just retraining yourself to, and so I will say on special occasions or holidays, I'll go above and beyond to make like fancier meats, or like a cheese dip or, a homemade ranch or something that like makes it jazzes it up in a way. But, that's just because we're so ingrained to those like traditions where you have to have something fancy to commemorate.
Right.
But yeah, like you said, it's year round. So eventually you're just like, it's just your habit. It's
Non-stop.
just how you eat. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And then it's your anniversary, your birthday, your significant other's birthday, your children's birthday. It's like there's always an opportunity to say, oh, this is the excuse, and that's why I have to eat it. I can't say no.
well, and I used to think it was just the sugars that were hard on me, but the more I've researched, it's like the food coloring, I know for a fact, like the red dye 40 impacts my kids in such a terrible way. It's like that no wonder kids are so hyperactive because that's all they're eating is stuff with food dyes in it. Or, the plant oils, the seed oils. It's like, I know those are super inflammatory, and I can tell, if I've had some meat that are cooked in like vegetable oil at a restaurant, like it's like instant, like inflamed fingers, that it bothers me. So it's like, once you kind of remove all that, You can kind of
Yeah,
tell like how it impacts your body. But if it's every day you're treating your body like a dumpster, it's like you don't
right.
even notice the effects, I think.
That's true. Your baseline becomes always kind of feeling iffy all the time,
Yeah.
but that's your baseline now. Whereas
Right.
when you take all that away and then you give and then you expose yourself to it, all of a sudden it's like it hits you and you
Yep.
realize how much of an effect it actually has. It's mind blowing. Um, I just wanted to mention those peanut butter cups. We're not going to mention the brand, but you know which ones we're talking about. If you look at the ingredient list, they have TBHQ as a preservative in all of their products. Those have been literally like there's scientific articles that have been published linking them to ADHD in children, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So like you mentioned, those food additives and the food dyes and the preservatives, all of those things, no wonder children are struggling so much with those kinds of behavioral issues.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, okay, we talked a little bit about the personal transformation, and congratulations on that, because very few people have had the chance to be exposed to this material. The vast majority, like if you go on Google right now and you have any kind of issue, you want to be healthier, you want to lose weight, you know, what is the best diet or whatever, you're gonna get everything other than a carnivore diet. It's
Right.
highly unlikely that our content is being pushed to the top, and it's really sad, you know, that people have to struggle for so long. I mean, I have been, so I'm a dietitian. I've done my bachelor's, my master's in nutrition and dietetics, a doctorate in exercise physiology, a personal trainer. I've been teaching at colleges and universities for decades, and it still took me a long time to finally read The Plant Paradox by Dr. Stephen Gundry, you know, where he talks about plant toxins. And then from there, started going on YouTube and I saw Dr. Sean Baker's videos and other people's videos. So if somebody like me in the field, and it took me decades to get exposed to this information, I'm like, how can anybody else stand a chance? You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, it takes a lot of bravery on your parts to kind of go against the grain, literally in the field that you're in, and say like, hey, this is
Yeah.
just junk. And I mean, we see with the dietary guidelines, it's been like the worst experiment in human history in my mind, because obesity and obesity related diseases like heart disease and diabetes and cancer, they weren't prevalent, 40 years ago. And now it's like they're
Normal.
skyrocketing, and
Yeah.
our meat consumption has kind of remained stagnant, but our consumption of carbohydrates has skyrocketed. And I've seen that it started with when I was a kid, being told that 9 servings of grains, whole grains, was like healthful a day, like wild to me.
Yeah. I started eating more grains after I begged my mom to take me to a dietitian. I was 14 years old the first time I started going on a diet. And she gave us the food guide pyramid in the 90s where the base was all grains. And she was like, eat all the carbs. And I remember our family members, like my aunt, my grandma, my uncles, we would go visit them. And I'd have like this huge bowl of pasta with Diet Coke, you know, and that would be like my lunch. And like, how did a dietitian give you all this food? And we're like, no, you don't understand, that's how it is, this is actually better, you know. And of
Yeah,
course that actually made things worse, but let's
right,
not go
right.
down that rabbit hole. All right, so let's talk now about why everybody is so misguided with regards to raising cattle and its effects on the environment.
Yeah, well, it's a multi-tiered attack, like I said earlier, for folks who are outside of the animal agriculture industry to replace it with what they see is the future. So we have like the World Economic Forum that's out there saying right now, in the future, we'll eat much less meat. And their solution is that we'll eat cricket powder and proteins, kelp or maggots, or literally there's one company that's come out that they have suggested going into third world countries and you swab your cheek cells and then grow your meat in a petri dish. And it's all like a bad science fiction movie. And, you know, they're pulling out the big guns like Kim Kardashian to talk about Beyond Meat. And even that, even with all of this like push and all of these attacks, you know, their stocks are tanking. People don't want this stuff. And so I really wrestled with, well, why do they keep pushing it so hard? But I think it goes back to, and this is like pretty deep stuff, but where we're told like we'll own nothing and we'll be happy, and our food will be provided for us, and it's not going to be meat because they know that's what makes people strong. So they want us very weak, and so they're going to give us whatever sludge that they come up with. Right now we have Bill Gates, who is buying a huge amount of farmland. He just bought $13.5 million worth of farmland in North Dakota, under the guise of he uses like little corporations, so you don't know it's his name. But he's the perfect example of what's happening, because he says, you know, in order to solve climate change, we'll need to eat synthetic meat. Well, so he's buying the farmland, he's creating the problem, and then he's a major investor in fake meat companies. And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, why would somebody like Bill Gates believe that climate change is driven by red meat?
So in 2006, the United Nations came out with a report that blamed the lion's share of greenhouse gas emissions on cow farts. And that it was like immediately debunked, but that information just went wild. And it's really hard to like undo something like that once the cat's out of the bag. But the real truth is that in the United States, the US beef industry contributes 3.4% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, a lot of suggestions are, oh, if we can just go meatless on Mondays, we'll solve climate change. If every American were to go meatless on Mondays, just one day a week, skipping the cheeseburger, it would reduce our carbon footprint by 0.26%. So what's really happening is these elitists, these folks that are attacking the beef industry, they understand that ranchers have a huge investment in the private property in this country. Right now, there is a push by our government to put 30% more of the land in the federal government's control by 2030. If they achieve that through the American Rescue Plan, 75% of our land would be under the government's control. And I always say, he who controls the land controls the food, and who controls the food controls the people. And so what I truly see it as, livestock producers are like that last holdout of saying, no, we're going to keep that land in private property ownership so that we can continue to grow food, because I don't really trust the government to provide the food for me, frankly. No matter who's in office, I just think the government's rather inefficient and not very good at what they do. So
we should, yes, I agree. We should have every right to be able to grow our own food. Doesn't mean that you have to, every single person has to have like a farm, but if you choose to, you should have that right, and you should be able to do that. Yeah. So that push from the government, how do you have any information on how would that work? Because I mean, are all politicians like ill-intentioned, and there's this giant conspiracy, or like how does that work? Or is it because they have to answer to the donations that they get, and because they get a ton of money from different kinds of corporations, you know, then they have to kind of do their bidding? Is that how it works? And if that is the case, who are those corporations that have an interest in having the government own more land?
So I think right now what we're seeing is a lot of virtue signaling on climate change. Like these major corporations that have huge carbon footprints feel like if they do a few things to tell their customers that they're trying to be greener, you know, they'll have a higher social standing. It kind of goes with like a social credit score. Like, you know, you have to do all these right things so you don't get canceled. So to me, it has very little to do with actual science. In fact, in the agricultural space, The carbon credit thing is going to be a big push. So people would get paid, landowners would get paid to capture their carbon, even though carbon is plant food and our cattle eat the plants and convert it into beef. And what I worry is along the way with all these incentives for us to be greener, even though we've been very green for years and years, and I could say all the reasons why, is what we're going to see is it all becomes mandatory. And what's going to happen then when all of these new regulations and new burdens on the producers come into play, more family farms will exit. The input costs will rise, food prices, meat prices will continue to rise. And a lot of these politicians are even suggesting slapping on a sin tax onto meat in order to make it more expensive to curtail our consumption. And it goes back, there's so much out there, but ultimately a large part of the science community that believes things like the dietary guidelines are good are also convinced that a plant-based diet is better. And so if we won't go with it voluntarily, well, they will find ways to change our habits. It's really alarming and very deep stuff. The web is very, very intricately woven on these attacks.
Wow. Well, you mentioned the syntax. What is that?
So like a sin tax, how you maybe cigarettes or alcohol would have an extra tax, or in New York City, the soda pop, pops are taxed
Right.
more because of the sugar. That's what they want to do with meat too.
Right.
They would classify it as like a dangerous thing that we need to be taxed on. So one way or another, they want to push consumer trends towards a plant-based diet. And
Yeah.
sadly, we're going to see, right now it's already happening. If you look at food prices going up, if you walk down the grocery store aisle, how many people can afford the beef? Much less, pork and chicken are going up too. Even eggs are going up in price. And so, people are going to go for the cheap carbohydrates that'll sit on the shelf forever and ever. So we're seeing it now, and it's really unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. I agree. So I was gonna say that I think, like, my opinion is also that a lot of politicians, like there's this mayor in New York, I forget his name.
Bloomberg?
No,
De Blasio?
no. He's
They're
the
all
one
bad guys.
who did the Meatless Mondays.
Yeah, that's De Blasio.
Is it?
I'm
He's
pretty
black.
sure. Oh, I don't know.
He went vegan. He
Oh,
went
okay.
vegan, and it worked for him. Although they have seen him eat fish, but he still says that he's vegan
Oh,
regardless. And he thought
Oh.
that his health improved so much, and he believes in it so much. So he ended up passing this new law. Oh, let's see,
Is
meatless.
it Cory Booker?
No,
No. I'll keep guessing.
I'll get it.
None
I'll
of these
get
guys
it.
are friends to agriculture, by the way.
Oh, you know what? You might be right. Mayor de Blasio, you might be right.
I talk about him a lot in my speeches because
Yeah.
he
Okay.
implemented meatless Mondays in the public school system. And this is to combat climate change. And why this really upsets me, because 75% of the kids in the Big Apple qualify for free and reduced lunches. 10% of those kids are homeless. And this politician is taking a protein source off the plate for these kids that might be their one decent meal of the day. And he's virtue signaling again, but putting, the burden of solving climate change on these poor kids that just want to have a decent meal.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe that's not the same guy, but
Yeah,
Mayor
it's not the same guy, but I think he passed it, but it was, there's another person as well. And I have to look it up, and I'll link the article in the description box below for everybody so that they know who I'm talking about. So there are several instances, and my opinion is that they truly believe that actually works. I mean, a lot of people truly believe that, plant-based works. Like sometimes also it's not like always like coming from a very dark
right,
place. It can be as simple as just politicians truly believing that that's a healthy way. I mean, how many doctors actually believe that that's how you get healthier, right? It's everybody. And so our politicians are also people, and they believe those things, and they are trying to do what they think might be good for overall, climate, everything. And the problem is that we end up with those catastrophic results with regards to nutrition for our children and the climate, right? Because the climate is not going to get better if you want to truly improve the environmental health of our planet. It's not going to happen by installing factories and synthesizing fake meats and other foods. Do you have more information? And I know, I think when you go around and you're speaking, isn't that like the main topic, right, that you're talking about? So what are some additional information that you can share with us regarding the difference between raising cattle versus agriculture, like corn, soy, etc., all those kinds of foods, and their impact on the environment?
Yeah, so I could just tell you an example of what my cows do, because I always say livestock fit in perfectly with the ecosystem of feeding the world. And so, the corn, my cattle do eat corn. And so we raise the corn, but not only do we harvest it and put it in bins and feed it to our cattle, but like in the fall, our cattle will go and graze those corn stalks. So instead of plowing those corn stalks into the ground, my cattle might be grazing on corn stalks until January. And so they're eating the husks and the cobs or whatever's in the field. Then they're naturally fertilizing it with their manure. And oftentimes around us in a lot of places, we plant things like cover crops. So it's like a mixture of radishes, turnips, alfalfa, a different variety of smaller type plants. They go between the corn rows to add nutrients, and our cattle will also graze that. So another thing cattle do that's amazing is they aerate the soil with their hooves. So with every step, they're adding oxygen to the soil. They reduce the spread of wildfires because with every bite, they're removing brush, so the fires can't spread as much, and they're promoting new growth. They also protect wildlife habitats. So on my ranch in South Dakota, where the grass grows, because our cattle are out on big, beautiful pastures full of grass right now, we'll find fox and deer, sometimes mountain lions, rabbits, mice, and the list goes on. So it protects wildlife habitat. By keeping those grasslands in place, we also reduce erosion because we have that soil cover. A lot of these grasses are native grasses, so they've been there since the beginning of time. So it's a very diverse variety of grasses that if you plowed it up, you could never, ever, put it back. You could never do that again. So we're protecting the wide variety of grasses and plants that grow in our pastures. Those grasses, their root systems go down for feet and feet. And so it also helps to, in drought conditions, they can access water that's very, very, deep into the earth. So that's pretty incredible. Whereas like soybeans and corn, their root systems aren't as deep. And so then we avoid soil compaction. Oh man, I geek out on this stuff. Also, cattle they're part of the water cycle. So what they drink, they will also, put back into the planet with, their waste. But they also upcycle food. So a lot of things that we feed cattle would otherwise end up in landfills. And, of course, there's emissions there. So they can eat these things and convert it into nutrient dense beef that we eat. And I could go on and on. But the truth is that my family, I'm raising the 6th generation in my farming family. And if we weren't sustainable, the land would be depleted by now. And yet year after year, we get a little better and we're able to produce more beef on the same acres that grandpa, had, by, selecting genetics and getting better at feeding and doing things like rotating our grazing so we can let grass rest and then it regrows while they're eating another patch. And so it's just this constant improvement. But I always tell the ranching community, if we don't celebrate all of these good things that we're doing, if we don't tell people, they don't know, because all they hear is the bad stuff about who we are and what we do. But as you can tell, I'm like super passionate about this, and I probably love the land even more than I love the cows. It's a true passion of ours to take care of our land.
Incredible. I make my students watch Sacred Cow documentary every semester now. And so, because they're always in shock because they're all coming in expecting me to preach the veggies and
Yeah.
fruits, you know, and it's like, and I get it because probably 99% of dietitians and, you know, nutrition professors are just, you know, repeating the textbook information. I'm
Yeah.
like, no. You're lucky though. I tell them you're so lucky you took this course with me because there's like 0.01% chance that that is happening in any classroom, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's quite mind-blowing once you educate yourself on the reality of things and you don't allow yourself to be a puppet that is fed those kinds of information from people who have a certain a kind of like a profit to be made from you believing that, and even from people that are well-meaning, well-intentioned, and they just don't know the full story. Their health hasn't suffered yet from
Right.
eating the full plant-based diet for, you know, decades, and they truly believe that their doctor knows best. And, you know, if they're having trouble with infertility, that it's not their diet, has nothing to do with their diet, you
Right.
know. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really like Nina Teichel's book, The Big Fat Surprise. That's always one I
Mm.
recommend to people. But that is one thing I struggle with is people will say to me, well, you're a rancher, so you are biased. You know, you're going to tell us all the good things about cows. But I always tell people, but I'm also a mom, and I became a mom because of the beef that I was eating. And I mean, without it, I don't know if my story would be the same. And so I believe in what we're producing, and we're becoming kind of like the dinosaurs. There's fewer and fewer of us raising beef anymore. And, you know, the amount of the percentage of each dollar sold is so low that goes back to the individual rancher. It's really, really hard to make ends meet. And so I always tell folks if they really want to kind of empower the rancher, my best advice would be to find a rancher close to you and see if you can stockpile beef yourself or buy, you know, a quarter, because that money then stays with that individual rancher. But also you can end up getting it a lot cheaper by buying it in bulk that way too. And getting to know a rancher is really
Yeah.
cool to be able to answer questions and or ask a lot of questions. And I know that's not realistic for everybody, but it's definitely helped my family being able to sell beef off of our ranch and build a network of people who support us then too.
Yeah, very good point. I should definitely make more of an effort to look around because I mean, especially here in Ocala, I mean, there's tons of ranchers around here. And it's not just about, you know, the like supporting, even though that's really important, but you also get it for a cheaper price. So that's another added reason.
Yep. And it can be a little intimidating buying like that too. I mean, it's a lot of money up front, but then usually the way producers sell it, by the time you know, compare it like what you're paying for a ribeye and hamburger, it's all kind of the same price. It's like a no brainer. But yeah, I know a lot of Florida ranchers. I could hook you up if you're
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And we can even put the links in the description box below so that people, if they are in the area, you know, they can find those ranchers more easily and we can support the whole system better that way.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts with regards to the ethical argument that is raised against us carnivores? And why are they wrong?
Yeah. So you could go at this from a lot of different directions, but you know, I talked about earlier how cattle protect wildlife habitat. It maybe is a little harsh to say, but every time a piece of land is plowed up to grow, you know, cereal grains or whatever, like there's probably a rabbit family that's getting murdered, you know. So
Brutally murdered too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Or, you know, pheasants laying their eggs, or, you know, just it happens. I always appreciate people's empathy to love an animal. I mean, I love my cattle and I respect them. And to me, part of respecting this beef animal's life is ultimately I value human life and, you know, the divine creatures that we are. And there's some level of death with any diet that you're eating. It's just the reality of working in nature. I mean, nature is harsh. Go watch a a hawk, circling over a field and see what happens when he finds his prey. It is nature. But I think by respectfully harvesting an animal, not only do we get, the steaks and the burgers, but we also get 100+ byproducts. So the makeup we wear, the stearic acid in our tires, it's in deodorants and crayons and pharmaceuticals, and on the list goes. If you were to, try to replace all those items with a vegan synthetic option, number one, imagine the carbon footprint of that. But number two, it's saving one life of one animal, a cow, in order to kill a bunch of other little wildlife animals. So I think people's hearts are in the right place, and I really do appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I want people to let go of that guilt and respect that animal, eat it nose to tail, and understand it's nourishing human lives, which I think is ultimately most important.
Yeah, I love your answer. I agree. And that's something that I see so much as well with ranchers. They love their animals. You have a very good relationship. You have a relationship of respect because you're more connected to the land. You're more connected to this natural life cycle that we're all in. And when I see sometimes blogs or even comments, because they come at me because I'm preaching the carnivore diet, and they get triggered, and it's like, how did you get your PhD? And all that kind of stuff. And the major argument is that how can you support animals being slaughtered and all that kind of stuff, and so I had to do a video because there's an actual scientific paper that was published not that long ago where they did the analysis, and the conclusion was that when you are trying to grow agricultural foods to feed a vegetarian or a vegan diet, you end up killing off 25 times more sentient or emotion feeling animals per kilogram of usable protein compared to the rangeland beef production.
I'm going to need you to send me that. I need that information.
I'll link it also in the description box below the video, and I'll send it to you as well, just so that you have the article and the YouTube video that I did on that. Awesome. And so because that's another thing also, is that even if some vegans or vegetarians or plant-based supporters might know that also there are animals that die in agriculture production, another argument that is leveled is that, but we're trying to do the least harm as possible. Even on that, it doesn't work, because you end up killing far more sentient animals to obtain the same amount of
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just understanding and respecting that circle of life too is important. We are so far removed from it. I mean, if your sole information of food and where it comes from is, YouTube videos, no offense, I love your YouTube, but like if you've never been a farmer before, you would think the worst things about them, because there's plenty of negative stuff that you could find on YouTube or every channel out there. But if you actually got to see it in real life, I mean, we've every day you have to show up for your cattle. You can't just even leave the place without considering who's going to feed and water them. And, our whole year is cycled around, okay, we need to cut the grass to make hay bales so that we have feed stored for winter. If winter hits and there's a big blizzard, okay, they need shelter, they need bedding. The waterers might be freezing up. So you're outside in -20 below temperatures taking care of these animals when you'd rather be cozied up inside, and so we love it. We don't ask for like a trophy for doing it or anything, but we're just so closely connected to, one, where our food comes from, and two, what it takes to get it to the grocery store, that it's like, if only people, I wish everybody could experience the life I get to live in, because it truly is so rewarding and a rich blessing for us. But also it just really makes you appreciate what's on your dinner plate so much more too. It's a beautiful way to live, and not very many get to do it.
Yeah. Well, how can people, what do you think the solution to all of this madness can be. I know you go around and you speak a lot, and in my opinion, I think education is always the best form of a weapon that we have, you know, when people are educated. But are there additional things we could be doing?
Yeah, for me, so I write children's books and they're all about ranch life and, teaching kids about where their food comes from. So I think it starts from a very young age. The anti-meat stuff is in Disney movies, Netflix, everything, all their cartoons. There's always these
Movie?
little. Oh yeah, there's always like something that they just slip in where it makes, the farmer and the rancher look like the bad guy, and the animal has the full range of emotions, and it plants the seed early that, oh, I shouldn't be eating an animal. Scholastic, a magazine that goes out to every elementary school in the country, they regularly tell kids that they should give up meat to save the planet. And then by the time the kids go to college, when they're developing their spending habits and the brands that they're going to like, they're just bombarded with all this anti-meat rhetoric. And it's like, no wonder we're going to have generations of kids who grow up and think meat is terrible. So I think it starts at a very young age. And so that's why the children's books have been a big thing for me, to try to get out there and at least kind of, here, I'm a rancher and you get to meet me. And now let me tell you about how we take care of our cattle. So this morning I was at the local library. We had 220 kids came, and I brought in a calf to town. I read a story, and I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but I will say, in regards to most of your listeners or viewers, you mentioned Sean Baker. He's a huge champion for ranchers. We don't have the voice or the platform. There's less than 2% of us that are involved in raising food. So it's very hard to get our message out. But if you, the consumer who enjoys eating beef, sees some of this stuff happening and these attacks happening, you guys can help us and be, alongside us fighting the good fight. So on social media, sharing your favorite recipes and your cuts of beef and just celebrating it. It means so much to us. And honestly, I want to be able to eat steak the rest of my days too. So I'm like, selfishly, for many reasons, I just want to keep cows on the land and beef on people's dinner plates. But yeah, it's going to take all of us advocating for it.
It's not even selfish. It's a basic human right to be able to eat the food that made us human. That's what we ate for 99.99% of our existence. That is the food that's going to give us our health, and it's going to give us our independence and our strength and our ability to survive and not be riddled with disease the way that actually is happening right now, with 80% of the population being either overweight or obese, and the remainder 20%, even if they don't gain body fat, they still have all kinds of autoimmune diseases, etc. So the tsunami of healthcare costs that are going to hit us in the next 10 to 20 years, I have no idea how we're going to handle it,
I'd also like to add, Alzheimer's is considered like a type 3 diabetes. It's, and so I always think, I'm not just doing this so I feel good today. I want to have my full faculties and be very strong and of sound mind when I'm an old lady. And so to me, beef is the ticket to achieving that. And yeah, it seems like society is just really convinced we need to go the other direction. So we're kind of in the minority here, but I would say anytime we can shout it from the rooftops that, meat is beneficial to our health and the planet, that's what we need to do.
Wonderful. Do you have any plans or goals other than what you are doing right now? Like in the next 5 years, any new projects?
The ranch is all consuming all the time. I think the goal is always to survive, honestly, and, not to toil away generations of hard work that came before me. My heart would just break if the ranch didn't survive to the next generation and my kids wouldn't have that opportunity. So yeah, I'm going to keep writing books. I'm going to keep trying to spread the word. My website's amandaradke.com if folks want to check it out. I sell a lot of beef swag, because I always think, well, it's a good conversation starter. So people can wear a shirt that says like, I love beef or something on it. And it, you know, it gets people talking. So I would say just trying to continue to grow and learn and improve the land and improve the beef that we're raising, and try to become more effective at sharing our story, because it's very hard to have your voice heard with so many people that just hate what you do.
Yeah, yeah. That's crazy to me that anybody would hate the sole way that we can actually feed ourselves regeneratively and, you know, sustainably. I don't know, but yeah, that's a
Well,
whole.
and right now we're headed into kind of a recession, and it's hitting everybody with food and fuel prices rising all the time. And so I'm really mindful that beef is hard for people to afford. But
Yeah.
on the back end, you know, farmers are going to have a tough time with the rising input costs too. And so just the production of the food and being able to stay in business is going to be really tough. So that's why I really can't stress enough having that relationship with a producer, so that can help you out. Especially, I don't know if grocery stores are kind of bare shelved where you are, but I know we have a lot of supply chain vulnerabilities right now that I don't want people to take their food for granted. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things happening right now that make it so it has a lot of farmers worried, I would say.
Yeah, I do get my stuff delivered ever since we moved here. So I haven't like gone out to a physical store to actually see the shelves. But I haven't had issues maybe with chicken recently a little bit. Yeah, but not with beef, thankfully, because I would blow a fuse literally.
Yeah. Well, there's your next YouTube video. Go tour a few grocery stores and see what you find. My
Yeah, that's a good
sister was
idea.
just in Target the other day, and she said it was like crazy to her how bare the food items were, but then like all the home goods and stuff was like stocked full. But
Right.
it seems like the food system has some issues. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think maybe some of it COVID related, some of it just, I don't know, things are backed up and behind. I know like plastics to bottle milk and that kind of stuff, or were for a while we're stuck on ports and not able to get unloaded. So there's just like a lot of variables, I think.
Oh,
It just
yeah,
makes me appreciate my food that much more, because
of course.
yeah, we're the fact that we can like feed this country and like most of the rest of the world too is just mind-boggling at times.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when you were talking earlier about understanding how hard it is for people to pay a higher price for beef, I think that's so true. I have that empathy as well. But people need to also realize the much higher cost they're actually gonna end up paying when
Yes.
their health starts deteriorating. And they might even not realize a lot of the health conditions that they're suffering from right now that is lowering and drastically their quality of life is
Mm,
directly related to the food that they're eating. It's just
exactly.
that they don't realize the power of food. Everybody should go right now to Rivero.com. That's like the Dr. Sean Baker's website, where he's collecting all the testimonies of
Wow.
all the success stories of people on a carnivore diet. I mean, you have psoriasis reversed, vitiligo, weight loss, anxiety, depression. Those are the easy ones. Sleep get better, eczema. I think all the skin issues are also the easy ones. It seems like every major skin condition, from acne to eczema to psoriasis, gets reversed. I mean, you see this on a daily basis, and people need to know that yes, they're going to end up paying a little bit more for beef, but overall a lot less than what they're paying for right now for, prescriptions and drug, doctor visits, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. And if you wanted to link, I did do an interview with Kelly Hogan about the different beef labels, but I could talk about it here. You know, I feel like once people enter the carnivore space, they feel like they have to do it absolutely perfect. So it needs to be organic, natural, grass fed, and people get really bogged down in that. And I always tell people the nutritional differences are so minute. You're paying for better marketing, basically. So buy the meat that tastes good. So like grass fed versus grain fed, the biggest difference is going to be the flavor. And all cattle are grass fed. It's until like the last 60 days that they're fed grains. So what that that corn flavor does is basically add a sweeter flavor to the marbling. You get more marbling and it's more of like a sweet flavor, whereas the grass fed is going to be, I would describe it as more like woodsy. I don't know, like it's just a different flavor. So to me, it's a flavor thing. And then, talking about like omega-3s and that kind of thing, like if that's something you're worried about, you should probably go eat fish, because it's such a small amount that you're going to get from grass fed. So I just want to remind people just to eat the meat that you like, that tastes good and that you can afford, and don't feel like because you can't afford like the super fancy organic, whatever, that you're doing it wrong. You'd just be amazed at just taking out all the junk and just eating meat will do to your health.
I love that message. Yeah, I will absolutely, once you send me the link to that video,
Yeah.
I will link it below so people can follow up and watch that. And you said all cows are grass fed, like even the ones that are like every single cow ever is always grass fed, and some of them then are finished off with grain. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say there's maybe some that live in a lot, but for the most part, the large majority. So they grow up on what's called a cow calf ranch, which is what I have. So we have the mama cows, they have their babies. We wean them at about 500-600 pounds. And from there, they go into like a pen or a lot where they'll get, grain or some grass. They grow up a little bit more, and then they go on kind of like a finishing diet to kind of fatten them up, I guess, at the end. But I suppose you're thinking of like big feedlots that finish the cattle. So those cattle are not like born there or raised there at all. It's at the end of the life cycle is when they end up in a feedlot to eat the grains. But for the most part, like ranches, like what I have, it's the mama cows that are raising those babies. And as long as the weather allows it, they're out on pasture. So that's another point to bring up too, is in South Dakota, the grass goes dormant. So we can't graze year round. And so that's why we have to put up hay bales, or is why we use grains during the winter months, because it'd be impossible to feed the cattle otherwise. But even if you're buying like a grass-fed beef, a lot of people think that means they're just grazing, free range. A lot of times they're in a pen too, eating a bale of hay in a pen. So they're not just roaming free, while the corn-fed ones are, locked up in a tiny pen. And that's kind of a misconception that's out there.
Very interesting. I'm so glad you clarified that, because I had no idea that it was that it meant that. Like, in my mind, grass fed is like so different than conventionally raised, and they're out on pasture all year long.
No, which is why I said it's just good marketing. And the great thing is if you do get to know a rancher individually, you can ask them all of those questions and they can show you exactly what they do, because raising beef in South Dakota is much different than raising beef in Florida or in California or Texas. So it's not like raising chickens where they're all done the same in a barn. It's very specific to the region that you're living in as well.
Got it. Okay. Well, Amanda, is there anything that you feel I did not ask you about that you feel is really important for people to know?
I'm sure we could just go on for hours talking about all the misconceptions that are out there about beef, but I just really appreciate the time and opportunity to share a little bit of our story and hopefully answer some questions and encourage people to go out and enjoy a steak, put on a big pat of butter on the top if you feel so inclined, and don't feel guilty about it. Enjoy it and know that it is good for the planet and it is good for your health, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it for 1 second.
Nope. If anything, I'd feel guilty eating anything else. That's what really makes me feel guilty.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. Where can people find you?
Sure. Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, just under my name, Amanda Radke. And then my website is amandaradke.com. And I do have like a failing YouTube channel with a few videos on there, but if people want to search my name on here, they can check it out.
Did you say a failing?
Yeah, it's terrible, but you can check it out anyway. I'm not good at it at all.
That's funny. YouTube is a long game. Like it takes
It's
forever for you to
it's
get traction. Yeah.
yeah, it's a beast. And that's what
Yeah.
I thought. I was like, oh, I went to this video took me so long to make and I have like 20 views.
Yeah. I would say collaborate.
Oh,
Collaboration literally expedites the process by 100%, like so much
okay.
faster. Yeah.
You'll have to give me some advice on how to like I think I can add this interview to my like list, right? Of cool things.
Yeah. You
Okay.
can put, yeah, I can send you this video and you can also post it on your YouTube channel. And then the good thing that you would want to do is like reach out to people who also have YouTube channels, you know, and invite them for an interview. And then normally they will invite you back,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and then because they have like more people, especially if they have
Yeah.
more people, that's really how you gain traction.
Sure. I
But
don't think I would help you much in that regard, but I sure appreciate that you thought I was cool enough to come on your channel.
Sure, sure. No, it's no, but that's not my strategy. Don't think that, you know, trust me.
Yeah.
That's not like the number one thing for me. It's more about what am I interested in? What do I feel like my audience would be interested in? Because I invite a lot of people with almost no followers. Some people that I interview have no YouTube channels and not even, you know, a lot of followers on Instagram. So it's definitely not my strategy. Although if I wanted to be like smarter just for the numbers, that like that's what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
No,
Yeah.
I really appreciate how much work you put into helping to present this information because I mean, it changed my life to stumble upon the carnivore diet. And so you're saving people's lives. It really is important work.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much coming from you, Amanda. And I will post all of your links in the description box below so that people can find you easily. And some of the stuff that we talked about, I'll also link. Other than that, thank you. And thank you everyone for sticking with us. And I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.